welcome all of you for this distinguished guest lecture by Professor Venkata Rao. And I'm really happy and glad to share that Professor Venkata Rao has been my teacher way back, almost 30 years back when I was doing my master's in Hyderabad Central University. It's very nostalgic to have Sir's lecture today, and we are really fortunate to have him for today. And he'll be talking on the topic, delving into the paradoxical ambivalence between economics and anthropology, anthropological perspectives. So, uh, economic anthropology as another subfield within anthropology is a very important area to research and work on. And as we are all waiting for others to join, in the meantime, I would like to request Dr. Sarparaje to introduce briefly about the organization and introduce our speaker today. Before we start the lecture, today we will also be releasing the digital magazine called Childhood Matters, and we have a privilege of Professor Venkata Rao to inaugurate and release this digital magazine before the lecture. I would like to request Sarparaji to start the session. Over to you, Sarparaji.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I'm audible.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, all. A very warm welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening for this lecture. We are extremely excited and delighted to welcome you to this distinguished guest lecture, which is titled Delving into the Paradoxical Ambivalence Between Economics and Anthropology, an Anthropological Perspective by Professor P. Venkata Rao. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to introduce Anthropos India Foundation and our founder, Dr. Sunita Reddy. Welcome you, ma'am. Founded in 2011, Anthropos India Foundation, AIF, promotes the discipline of anthropology, its philosophy, and its methods to engage in applied and action research. Our work seeks to address issues of local communities through a bottom-up approach unique to their cultures and people. We conduct community-based research rooted in local knowledge systems, local culture, and ecology to inform policy initiatives and drive transformational impact. AIF also conducts workshops, trainings, and advocacy on various issues, especially on children. AIF promotes visual anthropology through vibrant, authentic, meaningful ethnographic films and photo documentation. We also publish a quarterly multilingual digital magazine, Childhood Matters, and a monthly magazine, Anthropological, along with our own publishing house called Anthropos Books. Our founder, Dr. Sunita Reddy, is an associate professor at the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, Jawaharlal Nehru University. I also would like to take a moment to formally introduce our guest speaker for this lecture, Professor P. Venkata Rao. Professor P. Venkata Rao is a distinguished anthropologist with extensive academic and research experience. He holds a Ph.D. from Andhra University and taught in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Hyderabad for nearly 4 decades, retiring as senior professor. His expertise spans the anthropology of development, tribal studies, complex societies, and aging. He has served as head of the department, dean of the School of Social Sciences, and coordinator of UGC-SAP. Professor Rao has authored 6 books, published over 70 research papers, and guided numerous Ph.D. and M.Phil scholars. A recipient of the UGC Research Award, he currently serves as the editor of the Eastern Anthropologist and has led several national and international research projects. His work reflects a lifelong commitment to socially relevant and policy-oriented anthropological research. We are happy to welcome such an ardent elite scholar among us. Welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Sarfaraji. Sir would like to release the magazine. I would like Harini to share the magazine on screen so that everybody can see. Yeah, so over to you, sir. Sir, we can't hear you.
What about now?
Yeah, better, sir.
Childhood Matters. I'm very happy to release this magazine. In fact, I didn't get an opportunity to look into this volume, but still, I'm happy that Anthropos India Foundation is releasing this magazine for the audiences. I know a magazine like this, it provides opportunity to people to disseminate their ideas and interests, and also it provides information to a number of people. And it's not easy to release these magazines regularly. I understand actually the problems involved in this, coordinating with large number of people, getting contributions, then editing, and then compiling a volume and all these things. Not an easy task for somebody. In fact, I wonder how Dr. Sunita Reddy is able to do so many things.
Thank you, sir.
The magazine, the newsletter, then research methodology courses. I've been following the activities of Anthropos India Foundation, the number of activities continuously. And that too coming from JNU, which is more interdisciplinary, and then she is holding the flag of anthropology there. I know many anthropologists there, they drifted to various interdisciplinary areas, but Dr. Sunita Reddy, in an interdisciplinary area, but still sticking to this discipline, core discipline, and then doing a lot of contribution. It is a really commendable kind of contribution. Because I've seen number of activities continuously, something or other. There are many other associations, but Anthropos India Foundation is one. Regularly, activities are actually taking place in this. You know, they have bibliographies, references, and then so many other things. So it goes to Dr. Sunita Reddy and her team actually. I think there's a team supporting her, and must be a very active group of youngsters. May not be from anthropology, I'm sure. They are from various disciplines, but still holding the cause of anthropology. Once again, I have pleasure in releasing this magazine. In fact, Dr. Sunita Reddy had some kind of injury and also a surgery this month. But still, she did not actually take rest or a vacation and all these things. And then she is pursuing all these things and persuading lazy people like me and activating me to give a lecture today. So, I am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your kind words and very encouraging. In fact, it's all the seniors and professors like you's blessings, and definitely our team in our foundation, which is mostly anthropologists, but there are a few others who have joined. And Harini, you can just quickly scroll and then we can start the lecture. So this is quarterly, as I said, sir. This is multilingual and also quarterly and participatory. It's not just for children. You can see that most of these articles are meant for parents also and even teachers. So everybody can write because everyone has gone through the phase of childhood. So and it's digital, so it can be widely circulated. So we'll be circulating in the group so that everybody can later look into the magazine. So thank you so much, sir, for you releasing the magazine, and we can start with the lecture. So.
Okay, thank you. Now this lecture basically is about economic anthropology, which is supposed to be a bridge between anthropology and economics. So long back, I read an article by Scarlett Epstein, The Ideal Marriage Between Anthropology and Economics. It was published long back in a journal called as Economic Development and Culture Change, where Scarlett Epstein talked about collaboration between these two disciplines and kind of methodological hybridity between these disciplines. And then she urged anthropologists to incorporate elements from economics, and economists should actually incorporate qualitative methods of anthropologists in dealing with economic systems. But both these disciplines have divergent methodologies. Economics relies more on mathematical models, quantitative analysis, and then understands it an attempt to understand the rational behavior of the people, maximizing utility within various constraints. Whereas anthropologists emphasize on qualitative research, cultural context, and then diverse ways of societies organizing their economic life. And mostly we are qualitative in our approach. Now, we think that anthropologists study economic system as a subsystem of the society and emphasis more on non-economic factors. And also, anthropologists traditionally question the rational utility maximizers, whether individuals are completely utility maximizers. What about the role of social and cultural factors? Now, there are a number of people who wrote on the dialogues between, apart from Epstein, there are a number of people from economics and also from anthropology, like John Adams or Pranav Bardhan, a book titled Conversations Between Economists and Anthropologists. So their contribution by both economists and anthropologists, that's the only volume I have seen where both disciplines have contributed to the same volume, involving in a dialogue. Now, the methodological weakness as expressed by many of these economists is that you don't have quantification, your data is not comparable. Of course, Pranav Bardhan emphasizes the need for integrating the micro-level studies and re-studies with the survey-based and then macro-level approaches of economists. So we don't even go up to meso level. Mostly we confine ourselves to micro-level economics. So all scholars talk about complementarity of methodologies, which is actually emphasized by people. Everyone emphasizes that the methodology should be complementary and that micro and macro, qualitative and quantitative, they should support each other. So this is the backdrop in which I want to make this presentation today. I start with the this kind of backdrop. Then I go into how economic anthropology emerged as a discipline, and then the kind of issues that are dealt with in other countries and also in India, particularly in India, I'm going to talk about. And then, apart from the classical economic anthropology, about which I'll be talking more, I will also be dealing with the contemporary possibilities of economic anthropology. So, when I talk about the paradox, the conflicting and contradicting views between the disciplines, kind of indifference, and then also the positive acceptance of the contributions of the respective disciplines. Now, economic anthropology for us initially has been the study of technology. In the early books, we have actually hunting, gathering, fishing, all these techniques, and then mostly it is technology. Economy is equated with technology in the early classical textbooks. Fishing techniques, hunting techniques, cultivation, how pottery is made, all these things, they're all considered as part of economy. Now, of course, we talk about the embedded nature of economy within the society. Anthropology being a holistic study, it goes into all aspects, economic, social, cultural, political, and so on. But we were emphasizing that economic behavior is actually embedded in the social system, it is intertwined. And then people make their choices in terms of social and economic considerations or moral considerations. And then these considerations have implications for the social relations. So choices are always exercised in terms of values by the people. So for all the classical economic anthropologists, the economic organization is a study which is actually set in the social framework. As Raymond Forth calls it, social framework of economic organization. Then one question that is actually important in economic anthropology is the question of rationality and irrationality. Many people say that you are justifying irrational behavior, you are supporting it, and then many of these activities do not appear to have any kind of rationality. But we know that there are long-term economic and social implications. We always talk about a manifest function and latent function. So externally, you may see that it is a wasteful activity and all that, like something like potlatch, but it has internal functions, as many of these anthropologists emphasize. So such practices have been studied, like kola, potlatch, bride wealth, and so on. Then mostly initial studies were on the simple societies. This nationality question started with Malinowski, who established a fashion in anthropology denigrating economic theory, because he studied the Trobrianders and the Kola exchange, and the people are participating in economic exchanges without thinking about the gains and losses. It is a customary kind of ceremonial exchange which is taking place. So he emphasized that in these simple societies, the people are not motivated by economic interests, but it is only customary practice and so on. Then, so many of the anthropologists ignored the study of economic phenomena. They are only interested in gift exchanges, ceremonial exchanges, and then other kinds of activities and so on. Then the ideas of Malinowski were taken forward by Karl Polanyi, the economic historian, of course, who wrote the celebrated book, The Great Transformation. But he said that you have reciprocity, redistribution, market exchange as major forms of exchange. And then you can think about economic processes and economic institutions only in the market economies. The simple societies have reciprocal and redistributive exchanges, and then we cannot actually bother about applying these economic concepts and terms to these kinds of things. Then we have other school of thought. They argue that no, there is a kind of rationality across all societies. There are various kinds of rationalities. Rationality always for anthropologists is relative to the cultural setting. In different cultural settings, there are different kinds of rationalities. So in the simple societies, what to produce, how much to produce, what is consumed, all these things are conditioned by the values. Values, rules of conduct, patterns of behavior, and so on. So incentives to work are not economic, but social prestige, kinship obligations, social obligations, and so on. So we have actually people debating across each other whether there is a kind of rationality that is there, or the people who are in the simple societies are different. We know these kinds of formulations. People talked about primitive mentality and things like that, about the simple societies, that they have a different kind of logic and so on. So all these things actually are going on between two groups of anthropologists called as formalists and substantivists. Then the entry of the colonial rulers, colonial contact, and then the culture contact, and then other consequent changes in the economic institutions and processes. So we have more developed interest in the socio-economic changes after the colonial penetration, and then we took a lot of interest. And then later, of course, we have after colonization, post-colonial societies, independent nations, monetization, commercialization, and these kinds of things actually caught some attention. But what kinds of debates were there in economic anthropology at the beginning? One of the early debates is about determinism and possibilism. We have environmental determinism first, then cultural determinism, then of course economic determinism, which actually comes from the Marxists and others. That economic determinism talks more about economic factors and the distribution of economic power, which determines the cultural life. So we know the economic base and the ideological and then other kinds of superstructures which are there, but economic base is important. And then this is actually kind of economic determinism, that kind of production relations and so on. So we have actually the different kinds of debates about determinism, but we know that all these determinisms have been rejected because we cannot have actually one dominating force, either culture or environment or the mode of production cannot be the determining factor. There will be multiple factors and multiple causations. Then there are also studies and debates about the practices like bright price, potlatch, and then other kinds of things. Bright price has been studied as a kind of, there are actually two usages. Some people use the term bright wealth. They are emphasizing on the non-economic character of the payment made at the time of marriage. When you use the word bright price, you are actually emphasizing on the economic aspects of the marriage payment. So this also debate also that you have whether bright price or bright wealth, which is actually appropriate term in the simple societies. Those who argue that there is actually kind of economic behavior in the simple societies, they say that this bright price is based on calculations. It is not just customary practice, but there are calculations that bright price is fixed on different kinds of factors, desirability of the person, family social status, and then other kinds of factors are there. So in fact, law of supply and demand operates in bright price. And later, of course, in the dowry also, that is what many people. Of course, the transition from bright price to dowry is again another interesting area in which many people actually documented. And then M.N. Srinivas talks about the bright price to dowry. And then he talks about English education and then employment under colonial rules and so on. So this is a significant outcome of contact with the outsiders. Then there are others like Barbara Harris White. Many of them are not labeled themselves as economic anthropologists, but they are studying these economic behavior and economic institutions. Barbara Harris White talked about the dowry rates and capitalist tendencies in communities. Later, of course, I will talk a few points about Barbara Harris White. Then economic anthropology, one more debate is about surplus. Whether there is surplus in the simple societies, or we cannot call whatever that is there simple societies as surplus, because surplus results in generation of wealth, transformation of substance economies into commercial economies, and then a whole lot of changes happen along with surplus. So we talk about Neolithic revolution where there is a surplus production and so on. But the Marxists use the word surplus in a different context, a difference between the cost of production and the market value, and surplus is appropriated by the capitalists in the industrial era. And then there's a different kind of usage of surplus, but some of these people, they want to see parallels in all the societies, that there is surplus, there is banking, there is money, primitive banking, primitive capitalist, and so on. So we have actually debates about surplus in the economic anthropology, which went on. But one interesting formulation which was there in economic anthropology is the book by Marshall Sahlins about Stone Age economics, where there is a proposition about original affluent society. Lots of debates took place about this original affluent society, that is the society affluent. There are hunter-gatherers, and then Sahlins made calculations, and then with the help of data, he showed that these people have abundance without affluence. And also there is a work-life balance in the hunting and gathering societies. Affluence without abundance means that the society is providing whatever work they are doing, providing all the needs, but they work less. And then there is more leisure for them. And using data from various foraging societies, Sahlins concludes that hunter-gatherers worked only 5 hours, 3 to 5 hours a day. That is how actually he talks about original affluent society, and then many people talk about affluent society, and then there are books using this title and so on. But most important debate is about economic man. And when you say concept of economic man is there only in a certain society, is this goes against cultural relativism. Because maximization principle, maximization of advantage, maximization of the economic interests is supposed to be there in all societies. The principle of maximization can be there. Maximization is there in all disciplines. When we go to psychology, Sigmund Freud talks about maximization of pleasure. And an anthropologist like Edmund Leach talks about maximization of power. So Edmund Leach, in the study of Burma, political systems of island Burma, which was published long back, individuals faced with a choice of action, they make such a choice to gain power. That is maximization of power. So maximization is there in across all disciplines, but in anthropology also a lot of debate that what people are maximizing. What can people maximize in a non-monetized economy? The people maximize in prestige, social status, social recognition. So the argument is that whatever that is scarce in a society, people maximize. So economizing can be there in whatever scarce commodity that is there in a society. It's not just money or wealth or other things, but prestige and then a religious moral obligation and all these things. So the entire debate about economy and economizing led to various questions, whether there is economic rationality in the peasant societies and primitive societies. Do they respond to economic incentives? Do they maximize advantage? Can we apply concepts and theories from economics to simple societies? So some people say, no, you cannot apply economic concepts and terms. You have to use only socio-economic concepts. Wild wealth is a socio-economic concept. Bride price is again a kind of possibility that you are purchasing a bride and then taking and then using her services and so on. Then the differences, whether there is universal similarities across societies, and differences are only of kind or cash. So we have this debate, but many of these people who are called as substantivists, like Polanyi, George Dalton, and so on, they believed in the typologies of the societies, and then they separated the societies, and tribal societies, peasant societies, and then other contemporary societies, and so on. And the typologies, for example, marketless economies, economies with peripheral markets, market economy. This is Dalton's typology, Dalton and Paul Bohannon. Polanyi, the typology already I mentioned, reciprocity, redistribution in market. If you go to Marshall Sardins, he has another typology, generalized reciprocity, balanced reciprocity, and negative reciprocity, where he talks about, again, market kind of situation where there is a negative reciprocity. So these schools of thought actually debated amongst themselves without applicability of economic concepts and terms, and then generated lots of literature in economic anthropology about the practices, empirical studies of different societies at different places. And the people who are talking about similarities across societies in economic behavior, they always looked for similarities and parallels. And they are the people who are talking about primitive money as a variant of money, primitive banking, primitive capitalist. And then there may be economic institutions are there, but there is may not be there. Economic institutions may not be there, but economic processes will be there in all societies. So there is self-interest. There is actually in terms of gaining some status or position. Then this economic potlatch, destructive potlatch is there, and then some people say destructive potlatch leads to a vibrant economy because there is no incentive for production there. So if you destroy everything again, there is actually another potlatch you can give by accumulating goods, and then this is an incentive, and then this keeps the economy vibrant. People go on working and then producing. Otherwise, if they go on using the same goods, again, there will not be incentive for work. Then the other kind of potlatch, which is distributive potlatch, then it is a kind of investment. That is how some people have argued that potlatch is considered as an investment where a person gives a potlatch and then receives gifts lifelong from other people who are giving potlatch. So there are 100% results, and then the some of these American anthropologists who studied the potlatch like Franz Boas argued about this. So we have actually lots of things. And then some of these people went to the extent, Pospisil, an American anthropologist, saw a miniature of American economy in Papua New Guinea. It's a miniature of American economy. And then they are capitalists. We also talk about the big Ben, who is actually a kind of capitalist when we talk about political organization in the simple societies. Melanesian big man, about who is like a capitalist, accumulates, picks, then amasses a fund of wealth. That is all people are obliged to him and so on. So we have actually the formalists and substantivists debating amongst themselves. The kind of words they use. Berling's, for example, talks about demand for power, supply of prestige, cost of authority, marginal utility of loving somebody. So by using these terms, demand, supply, cost, marginal utility, but all these activities are non-economic activities, power, and then prestige, authority, and then loving, and then affection, and all these things, they have a marginal utility. So people argue that everyone can be regarded as an entrepreneur. Everyone is an entrepreneur, manipulating those who are around them. And then they are trading the products of labor, attention, and then for whatever return they can get. So they convert material and not material. And then this is actually economic anthropology always is the interplay between social and economic. Social sphere and economic sphere, they are intertwined. And then later in the advanced societies, you have the economic sphere completely separated. But in the early societies, of course, you have actually embeddedness of all these systems. So many of these people argued that pre-industrial societies do not have economic institutions. There are all non-economic institutions, but they have economic aspects. This is how people. So concepts like economizing, maximizing, elasticity, supply and demand, all these things are applicable only to commercial economies, commercialized sectors of economy. There are non-commercialized aspects in each economy. So we have a lot of debate that went on, but what is the crux of all this debate is that whether there is a universality in the behavior across societies. Maybe there are differences, but differences are in kind. These societies are completely different, primitive to peasant, peasant to modern. Or there is a continuum of behavior. This question is actually said to be the crux of debate, that universally all people have similar kinds of impulses and then incentives and activities and so on. So we have actually the debate going on across societies. And there are some people argue that there is capitalism in the tribal societies and tribalism in the capitalism. We also do not make calculations everywhere. In the modern societies also, you cannot think of profit and then maximization, but lots of other relations are involved across nations. So it is not actually, the other kinds of things are also there. But what has happened in all these things? In all these things, some people have romanticized the simple societies, like original affluent society. And then the simple societies are having all the virtues, ideal society. And this actually led to noble savage. Some people have talked about noble savage, moral economy, because all these people are rational, maximizing, but they're maximizing different things. Somebody who is going into fast unto death is also rational. He's foregoing his nutrition food, but he's actually valuing something else. He's standing for a cause, and he undertook a fast. So he's maximizing in something, but this may be an irrational activity for somebody else. On the other hand, you have the other group talking about a strong ideological antipathy towards market. They say that market has corrupted society. All the values are gone. All the morals have declined. So you have actually a ideal picturization of early societies, and then later societies actually a kind of degradation. kind of rural-urban continuum where urban is considered as a kind of degradation and so. Now, I will skip this kind of debates that went on in the anthropology, but what has happened in India in economic anthropology? And in India, the economic anthropologists initially paid minimal attention to the economic activities. This happened everywhere. And then study of economic activities is secondary, kinship, religion, social organization, maybe material culture. These are the focus in the Italy. All social aspects and cultural aspects are the focus. So economic aspects of marriage, family, kinship, Jasmani relation, village organization, role of caste and religion in economy. These things have been taken up, but in a exclusively. For example, the Society in India, the book, a comprehensive book by David G. Mendelbaum, it covers chapters. Society in India, we expect at least 1 or 2 chapters on economy, but the chapters are family, kinship, relations across villages, jatis, civilization, mobility, contact, and so on. So this is how social anthropologists have excluded, and economists, of course, also. There are a few books. There's a book titled Anthropological Economics by N.K. Behra. There's a book titled Essays in Economic Anthropology by one non-anthropologist by name Van Gupta. He's an IPS officer. And then we have, of course, others like Pranav Bartan, Conversations. So there are very few books with the title itself, Economic Anthropology. In fact, Herskovit's book, Economic Anthropology, was originally Economic Life of Primitive People. Later, it was changed as Economic Anthropology. So we have actually very interesting kinds of observations about practices in India. And the Jasmani system, which is actually some people look at it as an economic system, exchange of goods and services. Others look at as a kind of social, customary kind of practice, customary kind of relations about which actually people talked about. But there were very interesting examples. I have seen Walter Neal, actually, I think he gave a photograph. Harvest, heap of food grain, I think in West Bengal, and then all people actually sit around, the carpenter, the barber, and then all these village functionaries. And along with them, the representative also of the state also sits there. So the question arises is whether this is actually kind of Jasmani payment you are paying to the rulers, because he's sitting along with the other kinds of commons. So the ruler also received a share in the harvest, but and then it is inappropriate to call it as the, revenue, tax collection. It is something else, the payment. So we have actually studies about this Jasmani system. Of course, there is no system. System is a construction. We all know that. But lots of debates went on. Then the concept of dana and dharma, which is actually a Hindu concept, Hindu practice that is supposed to be an ideal behavior. But when you look at it from the kinds of obligations which are there in the gift exchange, for example, Marcel Mauss, who wrote that celebrated book titled Gift, it talks about triple obligation. Obligation to give, obligation to receive, obligation to reciprocate. So in every transaction, you have these obligations. Once you take something, you have to return. And then you have to reciprocate. And then once something is given, a relationship has to be bonded, cemented. So you have to accept it. But in dana and dharma, you don't have these kinds of things that the intentions are separate. There is no obligation to reciprocate. And then you have actually tricky concepts like this, which were discussed by some of these people. So some people argue that gift exchange is also like a commodity exchange. In the giving of gifts also, people have actually, they have an eye on what they are going to return. And then these gift exchanges are actually acquiring the character of commodity exchange in these days, depending on the kind of social relations and the context. So in Indian anthropology, you have actually the debates about these traditional practices. Of course, land relations have not been studied by many people. Of course, American anthropologists like Kathleen Go and then Mencher and then other people have actually studied these economic aspects. But of course, we have to mention about Andre Bete, who surveyed all the contributions and said that the neglect of land relations is an important. And he stressed that anthropological approach in the study of agrarian systems. And we have actually, he talked about investigating topics like technology, work cycle, production, and agrarian hierarchy. Now, rationality is something which is again discussed here. Is there a rationality in the traditional institutions? There was a discussion about hegemony system. The two important writers of hegemony system, William Weiser and then Schmidt, Bidelman, both of them gave different kinds of pictures about hegemony system. One talking about an egalitarian system, the other talking about a feudal system, hierarchical system, exploitative system. Weiser's famous statement is well known. Everyone is a master, everyone is a servant in the traditional system. But everyone is a master and everyone is a servant is actually ideal in the hegemony system as picturized by Weiser. But Bidelman doesn't agree, and then he says that it's an exploitative system, feudal system. But why people continued in the system is actually the question which was explained by Scarlett Epstein. Scarlett Epstein said, though it is actually disadvantageous, the hegemony system is like an egalitarian system in scarcity. In scarcity situations in all simple societies, there is actually caring and sharing. But when there is actually a surplus, the self-interest actually dominates. So you have actually in the Indian agricultural system, you have actually the uncertainties of monsoon. And then sometimes you have actually surplus, sometimes there's a scarcity. But to have assured supply of labor, the landlords actually shared with their clients, the communes, in an egalitarian fashion. Because otherwise your labor will go away and then you have to share with them when there is a scarcity. And then for the laborers, when there is surplus, they will not go away because they have to anticipate next harvest what will happen. So you have actually the landlords looking for assured supply of labor, the workers looking for assured supply of employment, and both of them are actually having their own rationality in continuing in a system which is exploitative. This explanation was given by Scarlett Epstein, actually one well-known economic anthropologist who is also a professor of economics and anthropology, trained in both the disciplines. So you have these kinds of explanations about the economic practices of the social institutions. So we have actually the Indian studies where they say that in the cities also the hegemony system getting extended in the urban areas and the apartments. Sylvia Watuk and others pointed about this. So whether non-economic activities are an economic waste is another question. Many people argued that joint families, and then there is no incentive for people and all that, but what is the advantage of joint families was again, many people talked about holding the property, keeping the land together, and then taking care of all the people. But we also know that the people are not actually not having any economic interest. The breakdown of the joint families clearly shows that when there are opportunities, people are moving out of joint families to nuclear families, and then they are actually pursuing their own economic interests. So joint family is breaking down, and then arguments in terms of, because we have arguments about the backwardness of economic development in the Indian society. What all the Western scholars talked about is the traditional institutions are an obstacle for economic development. Starting from the Nobel laureate Gunnar Bieder, who wrote about the inquiry into the poverty of nations. And then all the people after Bieder also, or we have known about Max Weber, who talked about Protestant ethic, All of the people actually talked about the family system, the joint family system, the caste system, the otherworldly nature of the religion, Hinduism. All these things are said to be responsible for the underdevelopment of the Indian society. So we know the ultimately the Western models of economic development were adopted, imposed through all these kinds of literature. We have the domination of the Western thinkers. So we have actually the debates about the rationality, the persistence of traditional institutions. And when we talk about Epstein and others, we also have to look into the Barbara Harris White, who talks about India's socially regulated economy. And then Barbara Harris White talks about the period of globalization and then the post-colonial period. Not that you have socially regulated economy in the simple societies, but in the contemporary society also, the gender, religious plurality, caste, class, and all these things are important. In fact, she showed that the interplay between caste and economy are continuing. It was demonstrated very easily. Caste clustering in occupations. Caste clustering, that occupations are concentrated in certain castes. Certain professions are concentrated in certain communities, certain religions. So understanding traditional institutions is important for the study of Indian economy in the era of globalization. This is the message coming from Barbara Harris White. So ignoring the economic aspects will not be able to do justice to the study of society, either simple societies or contemporary societies. So importance of religious and caste distinctions. Even in employment pattern, for a long time, you have actually the influence of these factors. So there's a field study by empirical study by Barbara Harris White in Tamil Nadu, and then others. India's religious pluralism and its implications for economy, a paper, working paper. So there are so many studies, socially regulated economy and then religious pluralism, two important contributions coming. Now I will just go into a few studies very briefly. Maybe I am exceeding my time. What kinds of studies which can say that we can actually some contribution towards the beginnings of economic anthropology? Many people actually have never claimed as economic anthropology. We have only anthropologists studying economic aspects. F.G. Bailey, for example, the well-known book, Caste and Economic Frontier. So this is actually a trendsetter, socio-economic impact of contact with the administrator. So administrative frontier, economic frontier, both these things. And also the trend of studying government policies and the impact on tribal communities. So how land transfer has taken place. This is one of the pioneering studies, and state and market resulted in significant changes in the resource utilization pattern. So this is one of the important studies in the beginning, in the 50s. Same time when Scarlett Epstein studied economic development and social change in South India. But the approaches followed. Methodological approach of Bailey is very important. Structural functionalism and historical approach. Synchronic and diachronic. This is actually a very good attempt to study the social and economic change. It's a trend setting. Then there is another similar study, Economy and Society in Rural UP, History of Colonial State Formation. This is Bernard Cohn, anthropologist among historians, historian among anthropologists. So he also studied the colonial impact and then how the laws and regulations, evolution of Jemindari system, all the changes have affected the village economies. Another historian, Kumar Suresh, also talks about tribal communities and state formation because of agrarian restructuring, the change in the mode of production resulting in the change in the kind of political organization. State formation is a very important concept of the Dr. Nagpur K.S. Singh. Then, of course, he talks about economies of tribes and their transformation. Economic development and social change by Epstein is a very important contribution, very important model. Social change in terms of structural change and cultural change, and then how economic development actually can stagnate, strengthen the existing traditional relations, and so on. But more important is the other study of Scarlett Epstein, which is a restudy. In fact, all economists valued restudies, either George Dalton or Pranav Bardhan or even Epstein. South India, yesterday, today, and tomorrow is a restudy of the same village, and then how the villagers are receptive to economic advantages, and then how actually they took advantage of opportunities, and these kinds of things. But most important is the research methodology. She talks about moving from micro-level studies to meso-regional studies. Always anthropology is mostly a village study that was conducted around which they talk about region and so on, but meso-regional studies and macro studies. And then importance to qualitative and quantitative variables is again another thing we have to take from Epstein's study. But qualitative and quantitative at the same time ethnographic study. But most important is policy recommendations, which are far-reaching. In fact, in the Epstein in the 50s, on the basis of studies, talks about introduction of agricultural minimum wages. And then it talks about the effectiveness of minimum wages act in certain areas, encouraging small rural entrepreneurs. And very important recommendation is need to give preference to landless in providing non-agricultural jobs. And one significant observation is that the assistance provided to farmers based on caste considerations, which she says that it actually given a new lease of life to institution of caste. Institution of caste has been abolished by constitution, but so this is what Epstein argued. And Epstein's contributions also are there in cultural sensitivity, in social marketing and marketing. In fact, market studies were undertaken by a number of people. Dharani P. Sinha, a culture change in intertribal market, or Airavati Karve, study of markets in tribal, rural, and urban contexts. Several people actually undertook market studies. But we have to move towards applied anthropology and development anthropology, where we have to think of this economic development and role of family, caste, religion, that Indian society is a conservative society, fatalistic society, all these things. And then we know the debate between Max Weber and Milton Singer, that people can actually balance both religious values and then the caste practices and also economic rationality. A study of Madras industrialists. Even religion provides rationality for the economic behavior of the people, entrepreneurial behavior of the people. So we have study of entrepreneurs is another offshoot coming from economic anthropology. Some people talk about the economic role of caste associations and then how they actually played an important role in economic, social, and economic mobility. Then comes applied anthropology, where initially all the studies emphasized on culture as a determining factor. We studied, S.C. Dubé and others, cultural factors in community development, India's changing villages, cultural factors in so many other places. There are studies. So we have actually overemphasizing on cultural factors in economic development and ignoring the economic dimensions. All the explanations are in terms of cultural logic. But economic advantage is given importance, but we ignore other constraints of the people, and then we by overemphasizing on the cultural logic. So we cannot understand underdevelopment or development if we think in terms of only the social institutions and then acting as a conservative force, ignoring the economic aspects and so on. So we have the understand the social change, economic development and social change, the social relations which play important role in acceptance and rejection of innovations, and also how people are ready to break the existing social relations to pursue economic interests. Both these things. For example, we have the consequences of some of the programs which are there. National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. We have actually, it releases people from the bondage, exploitative relations of the landlords. But there are other implications for availability of agricultural labor, and then the bargaining power of the laborers also is undermined. So we have actually a number of implications of contemporary development programs, even in sustainable livelihoods approach also, where we emphasize both on capabilities, assets and activities, cultural and social capitals of the people, but also the changing the institutions and all these things. And then we think that in an automatic fashion, the sustainable livelihoods actually happen. But the process is much complex. See, it is like this, economic development, earlier all the theories say that you have to have external investment, capital, technology, resources, labor. If they are actually combined in appropriate combination, economic development will take place. So all countries which have resources and labor look towards the technology and then capital coming from outside. Ultimately, a dependency relations actually have come into existence on these fronts. That is what the Marxist development workers tell, the dependency theories. So you have modernization theories and dependency theories. Modernization theories always say that you have to reform your institutions, you have to change your traditional practices, caste, religion, and all these things are obstacles. There must be a level of savings, then the economy will take off theories. So modernization theories on one hand are there, then the dependency theories about economic development talk about the perpetuation of dependency relations also. So we have debates about economic development, conservative nature of the peasants and tribals and the rural people, underlying logic, economic logic and cultural logic, and then vis-a-vis. So economic anthropology actually offers a very fertile ground for all these kinds of interactions. Then we also study a little bit of agriculture, culture and agriculture. We talked about shifting cultivation and so on in the early days. But how transformation has taken place in the field of culture, green revolution. Then the genetically modified crops, aquaculture. So in all these things, we have actually displacement of farmers, feminization of labor, and then change in the labor relations. So economic development and social change, this continues actually. Or another aspect which is contemporary is contract farming, which is related to this agriculture contract farming, and then what kind of relations are evolving in the contract farming, where many of these activities, of course, contract farming has been there, but so we have actually a number of perspectives on contract farming. Now we have so many crops, rubber, coffee, tea, basmati rice, there is contract farming in sugarcane, cotton, tomato, potato, contract farming by companies coming from the multinational corporations, and then coming into, then farmers, what is happening to them? And in what way they are actually taking decisions and so. So I think, now, what kind of possibilities are there in the economic anthropology? So I think I'm exceeding my time, but we started a little 10 minutes late, so I will take this 10 minutes and then. So what kind of role is there? Many people talk about non-applicability of Western concepts, need for Indianizing concepts, look through Indianizing the discipline. So Western theories should be actually discarded. They are not appropriate. We have to have appropriate concepts. So this actually takes us to the earlier kind of logic that you have to have in the traditional society, socio-economic concepts, and then don't accept these other terms and concepts coming from the industrial societies and capitalist societies. So is it actually something like that? So when we Indianize the discipline, again, the problem of comparability and all these things come. Then the interdisciplinary studies, about which of course I talk about, because morning also some people are debating about interdisciplinary studies after seeing the brochure. So first we have to move beyond the academic kinds of debates, formalist, substantivist debate, surplus, right price, dowry. These are all academic disciplines, academic debates. And then these things have not, we have actually satisfied our intellectual urge to debate amongst ourselves about bride price or dowry or potlatch or something, Jasmine system. But we have to think in terms of contemporary debates, contemporary situations. For example, if there's a plan or budget, who are the people who are sitting in the debate on this budget or 5-year plan? All economists. Don't have a social scientist debating on the kinds of sectors, allocations, priorities, schemes, and so on. So the public or perish is some slogan given by some people. Unlike the earlier publish or perish kind of thing, we have to go public and then participate in these kinds of dialogues on newspapers, TV channels. Then something which is very important is informal economy. In fact, large majority of the people still are in informal economy, unorganized sector, which are not registered. People do not pay taxes, and then government is trying to bring them. Black economy. See, where they evade taxes, prepare number of duplicate goods, spurious goods, then unaccounted kinds of economic activities. Many people avoid paying taxes. Then similarly, there are other kinds of support mechanisms like chit funds, kitty parties. So these are all mechanisms which are evolved for social informal credit supply systems. So these are important avenue in the small scale, small societies, so for small investments, urgent cash needs. So we see actually in these kinds of things, again, a combination of reciprocity, redistribution, and also market principle operating simultaneously. So the point is the separation of societies in terms of societies having gift and ceremonial exchange, societies having redistributive exchange, all these things overlap, even in the modern society. Then one area which is very interesting to actually study by the economic anthropologists is the rise of other backward classes in rural areas. So everywhere, the dominant upper castes are in the process of being replaced by the middle level castes and other backward class in the rural areas. So study of caste process, this is a genuine area of interest for anthropologists. But if we integrate the economic analysis, how this rise of these communities is taking place, and then they're actually moving towards capturing power. So economic analysis and then caste process should be integrated. This is what actually we have in future economic anthropology, apart from study of the entrepreneurs, business, and markets. So we have actually these kinds of studies. Then crisis in agriculture, commercial agriculture, all these things. Then you have various kinds of stereotypes about work culture, that the role of remittances, and then the kind of work culture. Because traditionally all people said these people are lazy. The people cannot hard work. About tribals, there are so many stereotypes that these people are not hardworking. There are a number of festivals. They are dancing, feasting, alcoholics, and all these things. Then people show data that how much of hard work is done by people. It gives an entire chapter on how people actually work. So they are not actually lazy. They are not working hard. And then we know that the Indian professionals are valued all over. Stereotypes are not acceptable. This is not a fatalistic society. And then the future can be changed. So we have lots of relevance. Then another area of relevance is the globalization and its consequences. Again, lots of possibilities are there when we study the device of welfare state, and then the international connections and ramifications, job markets, technologies coming in, opening up a market. All these things actually we have both emancipatory and destructive aspects of globalization, which are there for study. Opening of an economy led to rise of poverty according to some people. Inequalities have risen. So I'll come back to the title of the paper, Paradox of Ambivalence. We have both actually conflicting kinds of feelings towards each other, economics and anthropology towards each other. Many people talked about bridging the gap, and there's a recognition that economists are failing when they are not able to predict or explain real-world economic behavior, especially in the development process, decision-making process. So many people argue that incorporating anthropological insights, in fact, can provide a more complete picture. So individual behavior in the societies where decision-making is involved, and then individual behavior ultimately leads to collective behavior. So there are always an advantage in bridging the two disciplines. That is what many people argue, that we should have an interdisciplinary approach, offer valuable opportunities to go into the complex problems of the society. So many people pleaded for collaboration, but we have actually the challenges. Challenges we see, many people are preoccupied with identity, holism, then concept of culture, empirical studies of fieldwork, qualitative descriptive studies. All these things are our strength. So maintaining disciplinary identity, actually this becomes an issue in the context of these kinds of a marriage between disciplines. This is a word used by Scarlett Epstein, ideal marriage between macro and micro level approaches. Then some people argue that the disciplines have unique contribution. Each discipline has a unique contribution. This will actually get erased if you go for these kinds of interdisciplinary. So there is a concern about dilution of disciplines, identity of the disciplines. But there are numerous benefits in and challenges also. Many of the research institutes have sociologists and anthropologists. Though they are dominated by the economists, they just don't have that only economists will be there. This is an institute of development and so on. But the problem is disciplinary culture, methodologies, distinctive methodologies, research paradigms. Then many people, in the name of interdisciplinary studies, carry out superficial studies. I call this as interdisciplinary indiscipline. So if you say interdisciplinary study, you neither follow this nor follow that, the rigors of methodologies in both the disciplines, and then do something else, but call it as interdisciplinary study. So this is interdisciplinary, indiscipline, and then there is no depth coming in these kinds of superficial studies in the name of interdisciplinary studies. Then some people are concerned about careers and marketing, and then if you have a kind of these kinds of interdisciplinary areas, there will be a problem. But what is important is there is rapid development taking place in all disciplines. Naturally, the kind of things in which anthropologists are interested in, economics people are not interested in. Some of them may be interested in. And there are always communication barriers across disciplines in terms of jargon, concepts, theories, and then so on. And most of these economic anthropologists, so-called economic anthropologists, that includes me also, we don't have much understanding about economics. So again, superficial understanding of economics, and then many of them do economic anthropology. There are different schools in the economics. There is no unanimity of concepts, Keynesian economics, and then later schools, pre-Keynesian. So a lot of diversity, and then also in anthropology, you have so many schools, and then economics, every discipline has so many schools. So integrating diverse perspectives is a problem. That is why we have this kind of ambivalence. And then how to overcome this conceptual confusion across disciplines. This is a main thing, apart from career barriers and all that. I will just give one example. In our university, we had a distinguished lecture by Scarlett Epstein. The dean, actually coming from School of Economics, introduced Scarlett Epstein as an anthropologist. And Scarlett Epstein immediately took an objection. She said, I am an economist. I studied economics under Arthur Lewis, who wrote forward to one of my books. So she lamented that economists considered me as an anthropologist, anthropologists considered me as an economist. So situation is very peculiar for me. And she said that it actually became an advantage for her. She saw the positive side of being neither here nor there. And she combined insights from both the disciplines successfully and pursued an interdisciplinary approach. So she should be more role model. And very few people who are both professors of economics and anthropology like George Dalton or Epstein. She created her own new methods. And I will stop with one kind of idea. What kind of ambivalence is there in political economy? So there are people who are combining, doing things. Political economists are there in economics and also political science departments. Economic history, again, in both the departments. Economic sociology also is there. So it will be interesting to see actually what kind of debates went on in political economy, economic history, economic sociology, and all that. But I'm not talking about merging of the disciplines or evolution of a no branch, but my concern is about collaboration between the two different disciplines, combination of approaches. So thank you for your very patient listening. I will stop here.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for a very enlightening and informative lecture. It was very interesting and very refreshing. As I said in the beginning, it brings back our master's days where we used to be very attentive in the class. So it's refreshing the whole subject. And you've covered a wide canvas, starting from the evolution of subfield, which is economic anthropology, and the overlaps and also interplay between the economics and the subject anthropology. And it's very interesting to see how you've traced out all the scholars who have contributed immensely on this particular subfield, and giving examples of bride price and many other customary laws. It's very interesting when you said about how others look at the simple societies, and even in my own research in Andamans, when I was looking at post-tsunami relief and rehabilitation, the Nicobaris were stereotyped as lazy and laid back because they used to work for just 3 hours every day. And when the rehabilitation was happening and the money was given to them to work, they were not interested in taking up labor work. And thereby the administration felt that they are lazy and laid back, and they didn't understand the real sense of the work culture which the Nicobaris were having. Interestingly, I also wanted to understand how the current term business anthropology, because that's something which is very much now in vogue, and also design anthropology, whether these are sub fields of anthropology, I'm not very sure. So with those comments, sir, and if you would like to respond, and I would request all our senior colleagues here, many of them who have joined, Dr. Neeta Mawar, Professor Vinita Menon, then we have Professor Lalit Kumar, Dr. Raviranjan Prasad, and Dr. M.K. Ved, Professor S.B. Roy, and Shalina ma'am. So we'd be happy to have your comments, Indu Talwar, Professor Indu Talwar, Professor Gregory. Would like to have your comments and any questions, please raise your hand and then we can take it up from there. So over to you, sir.
I will just respond to this question of business anthropology.
Yes.
Initially, we have economic anthropology and then study of entrepreneurship. How entrepreneurs emerge